Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and yeah, this week's kind of weird. And it's Billboard BREAKDOwn.
I don't remember.
But okay, I think we're back to something approximating a normal schedule for a bit. I don't hear that obvious major album that's gonna shake things up until Morgan Wallen bulldozes the Hot 100, so I'm gonna appreciate the breather while I got it, but that's not saying there weren't some intriguing developments. Hell, on some standards, this wound up surprisingly odd, at least in terms of some of the bigger names making their returns and considering the songs. But before we get into all of those, our top 10, where for another week, Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA held that number 1. And I do think the margins were a little close there. It was kind of shaky. It's still dominant and gaining on the radio, but it lost the top spot on streaming and didn't have that much of a sales push. It won on the very edge there. And I'm largely happy about that because this was the week that Nokia by Drake made its run at number 2. Winning out on both sales and streaming, it just couldn't close that radio gap. And given the Luther video will impact the charts next week, I don't see that changing. Hell, it overtook Die With A Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars at number 3 though. Not exactly surprising given how its streaming and sales have taken a step back and it spent the week wavering on the radio, but that leads to a fascinating new challenger, All the Way by BigXThePlug featuring Bailey Zimmerman at number 4. We'll get into this debut much later on, but it's kind of fascinating how strong this came through from these two acts, with enormous sales and streaming, even if the radio hasn't really touched it yet. I'm not sure they know what to do with it. Even when it will inevitably fall back, it may pick up some momentum. We'll have to see. But it did leap past Pink Pony Club by Chappell Roan at number 5. Pretty solid radio run and stable streaming helping it hold up, especially over a bar song Tipsy by Shaboozey at number 6, which despite an okay streaming week, it's absolutely on its way out. Then leaping into the top 10 on some really strong streaming, we got Ordinary by Alex Warren at number 7. I'll admit this one surprised me. I thought it had better radio than it actually does, especially as it screams long-running adult alternative radio hits, but there is some momentum there, and given the worldwide traction, I don't see this going away anytime soon. And speaking of songs that won't go away, Lose Control by Teddy Swims pushed back to number 8, which is still stubbornly stable, if kind of declining a bit in all channels. And speaking of frustrating stability, I'm the Problem by Morgan Wallen held at number 9. More stable in the charts, not the emotionality. But it's seeing both streaming and radio gains. We aren't getting rid of this junk quickly, and the album's only going to make it worse. And to top things off, Beautiful Things by Benson Boone's back in the top 10 yet again because the streaming won't die, people are somehow still buying this, and radio is not dumping it fast enough. Now that naturally takes us to our losers and dropouts, and we got a few bigger songs exiting. Bed Chem by Sabrina Carpenter will comfortably have its year-end list spot for 2025, but it might be a bit tougher for 4x4 by You by Lainey Wilson or Tweaker by Leangelo Ball to snag spots as they exit. And there's really not a lot of losers here, most of which can be tied to album impact outside of The Giver by Chappell Roan, not really getting a lot of momentum, down at 40, as the radio has been really slow to get on board. But from albums, from Playboi Carti, we got Rather Lie with The Weeknd at 46 and Evil Jordan at 62. And from Ariana Grande's debuts last week, Twilight Zone at 41, Dandelion at 60, and Intro End of the World at 89. Incidentally, slight mistake there last week on my part. I tagged it as a new arrival due to the extended version of the song, but in reality, the intro did chart before when the original version of the album dropped in 2024. Just wanted to correct that. Now that takes us to our returns and gains, of which, again, it feels like there's a lot more of the former in the wake of small album bombs going away. So let's start with the songs that are lurking near the very bottom, and there's a few tied to Kane Brown, like Backseat Driver at 95 and Haunted with Jelly Roll at 99. Ugh. Then there's K by Raul Alejandro and Romeo Santos at 100, alongside Por Esos Hoyos by Fuerza Regida at 98. And thanks to BigXThaPlug making his top 5 debut, we got the largest back at 92. Now the biggest return also came from a new arrival previously, Emergence by Sleep Token. I'm a little shocked they're catching on, but we'll get to that more later on as well. But we really didn't have much in the way of gains here, with Raul Alejandro catching a little bit more more traction with Que Pasaria with Bad Bunny climbing to 85, alongside Morena by Net and Vega and Pesa Pluma off the debut last week to 83. Then we got a sizable boost for Am I OK by Megan Moroney to 55. Can't imagine in these times why it's doing well. And for our last debut catching some traction, Back to Friends by Sombr rose up to 70. Again, this one doesn't surprise me given his second charting song this week, but given how I liked Back to Friends, it's kind of nice to see a new self-produced name with talent and backing and potential hit the Hot 100. I do want to hear more. And that naturally takes us to our new arrivals, fittingly starting off with number 96, Undressed by Sombr. So Back to Friends was the sort of song that showed a lot of promise with the sound design, the production, the hook, but it could also very easily show a singer-songwriter tilting into insufferable melodrama, even though he is young. So when I saw his next charting song had this title, I had a real sinking feeling, because I was in no way convinced that this guy could be credible as a direct heartthrob, at least not yet. And thankfully, that's not really here. In essence, it's playing much the same lane as Back to Friends, with the frustration and mixed signals from a partner where he's got not over it all over his face, but this time the girl is very plainly moving on as she thinks that Sombr is holding her back. Not gonna lie, that's a pretty credible observation, because the whining starts to test my patience when you get lines like, "I don't want the children of another man to have the eyes of the girl I won't forget." Feels like we're really jumping the gun to the histrionics here, dude. Especially when on the hook, how he's talking about how he doesn't want to pretend if he's kissing some other girl's neck that it's hers instead. But again, dude, you're still kissing this other girl's neck. You're not exactly convincing here. It's a shame the writing leans so heavily on this melodrama because, again, I like the sound. The shuffling knock of the bass groove with that slick little electric flourish that's indebted to a lot of washed out 2010s indie trends, but it actually kind of lands the hook. The tight multi-tracking, the thicker atmosphere touching flashes of 90s, 2000s preening. It is some impeccably produced and well-polished pop. I don't know, maybe it'll further grow on me with some time, but let's hope the next single tries something new or a little different subject matter. We gotta hope. Number 86, Back to Me by the Marias.
Down across the sea, I'd be there in a hurry. Baby, come back to me.
So after No One Noticed became the definitive sleeper hit of this past year, I was genuinely curious if the Marias would be able to follow it up. So I was pleased to see another song from them debut this week, and somehow we have Not Over It stretched over another track, and these washed out dreamy guitar phrases as a running theme. But I think the Marias stick the landing a bit better than the gauzy sweetness of the synth pulse. There is this slight unstable edge to how much they want this guy to come back, down to getting in front of his apartment. The most prominent emotion, if we're being real, is wistful sadness. You get the impression that this might be wishful thinking at best that they could reconcile. Granted, it's doing so by borrowing nakedly from Beach House's playbook the past 15 years, I see what you're doing, alongside some wonky, elongated stutters that seem to owe a lot more to the lightest of late 80s, early 90s dream pop that dabbled near alternative. But that's not exactly a bad thing either. I'm not going to claim this reinvents the wheel, but it is largely pleasant. I think it sticks the landing. And if the Marias are going to stick around, I can't really complain. Good song. Check it out. Number 68, Chest Pain I Love by Malcolm Todd.
Bet I don't know where to go, so I'll lay here instead with my symptoms of sorrow and dread. They all said it would fade, but again and again.
Alright, I get that this dude is really young and caught TikTok virality, but dude, nobody likes chest pain, to say nothing of loving it. It feels starkly literal for describing affection. It's clunky. But okay, the pettiest nitpicking aside, Malcolm Todd is a singer-songwriter who found some TikTok virality by claiming his songs were unreleased Steve Lacy demos. Not a good sign to begin by nakedly lying, but apparently his sister is best friends with Gracie Abrams, contributed writing and music video direction for her albums, which might provide some explanation to how he got picked up by Columbia while opening up for Omar Apollo. But let's not mince words. This blows. The horrible weedy synths drizzle all over the underpowered guitars that have none of the swaggering soul that Steve Lacy can deliver, which is also true for this guy's Glee reject vocals that carry an astounding lack of charisma as he tries to mule through all his vocal runs. And no, the strings on the final hook or the flattened grind of the guitar solo can't salvage any of it. Then there's the lyrics, full of such unabashed yearning for this other person that he doesn't even know that he can't even get out of bed. It's an unflattering whimper of a song that, even if I can accept the premise that love can bring you low like that sort of emotionality, I don't get any sense of allure as to why anyone would want to be near this guy. The single verse is a mess of, well, I was busy, but now I have time, so why don't you come live with me and lay around all day so I'm not lonely, and it feels all the more sickly than compelling. It sounds like Powfu's Deathbed by way of Loathe ripping off Steve Lacy, and badly at that. The worst sort of TikTok afterbirth. Terrible song. Skip it. Number 52, End of the World by Miley Cyrus.
Let's pretend it's not the end of the world.
Thank God we're moving on to someone who actually has a compelling personality, albeit where I'm not sure where Miley was planning to go this time. She still has a lot of tangible celebrity and star power, but she didn't tour for Endless Summer Vacation, and Plastic Hearts came out mid-pandemic, so quite frankly, I had no idea where she was gonna go next. So naturally, the solution is to get Sean Everett and Jonathan Rado, both indie rock staples the past decade behind acts from The Killers to Wise Blood, from Always to Alex Cameron. And look, I'm not against this choice. With their windswept brand of glossy 80s synth-inflected indie rock, that could be a really interesting fit for someone with as huge of a voice as Miley Cyrus. And yep, there's a part of me that feels like they might be the wrong choice. Miley's sharper, keening delivery fits in the 1980s, where she's center stage, she sounds raw, giving her all the proper space to vamp, and yet this doesn't really do that. The soundscape feels large, with the guitar rollick and the well of synth gauze around the vocal multi-tracking, and the chirpy ABBA-esque melody with enough ragged edge to fit her, but it's all a little bit too cloudy for her to cut through effectively. She's not centered well, and I really don't care for the lyrics either. The whole globetrotting, let's pretend it's not the end of the world, it doesn't just feel tired coming out of songstresses these days, hell, was dated the past decade, but it feels like a weirdly defeatist way of confronting everything that's going on around us. There is some nihilistic glamour, sure, but this sort of detachment paired with an incongruent atmosphere, it doesn't work. The production's cool, and Miley tends to look outside the box for instrumental ideas. If they're around for the rest of the album, I am intrigued, but this didn't land, and I really wish it did. But speaking of weird instrumental ideas, number 34, Caramel by Sleep Token.
Stick to me like caramel. Walk beside me till you feel nothing as well.
We live in a world where not only does Sleep Token have 2 songs charting on the Hot 100 simultaneously, but this debuted higher than Miley Cyrus. And I think they should count themselves lucky that they came out in such a rough week, because by their standards of this genre hodgepodge, this is rough. Opening with this plucky, borderline nursery box melody that doesn't remotely blend with the heavy pitch correction slathered all over the lead vocal line and the snapping, clicking, fizzy knock of the hip-hop percussion that quite frankly sounds like something from the mid-2010s and dated as hell. Yeah, they start punching in the live drums with some trap progressions, so when the actual sludgy wall of chugging riffs fall in for the metalcore vibe, it kind of makes sense, where by the outro they've intensified to genuine blast beats and some smothered black metal screams, but the novelty of the fusion kind of evaporates when you ask the uncomfortable follow-up question, was any of this done that well? Because melodically it's undercooked, the drum work might be impressive, but pretty stock by any black metal fan, and none of the screams remotely work alongside all the auto-tune warbling of the singing. Any black metal fan will tell you just how difficult it can be to balance out some cleaner vocals with the screams and make it sound cohesive or coherent or not embarrassing, and this doesn't even get close. For as much as the singer draws on R&B, there's no convincing, soulful intensity, and the auto-tune doesn't help. Granted, some of that might have to do with the content, and okay, it sucks that their anonymity gimmick has been spoiled by way too much publicity and fans trying to goad reactions from it, which absolutely fits in the proud tradition of entitled shitty fans who lost any social decorum post-pandemic and behave like absolute cretins who should be banned from all concerts until they grow the fuck up and learn how to behave themselves in public. And adult fans are included there. But for as much as Sleep Token have built up this iconography and grand narrative in their music, it's kind of weird to hear something not only self-referential, but in a borderline rap cadence making a Devil Wears Prada reference about the hellish experience of fame. It shatters any sense of immersion and winds up sounding kind of petulant, even if that's unfair, especially when they're trying to come off as magnanimous, or if folks don't know any better, they of course understand. So yeah, to me, doesn't work at all. It's mediocre to outright bad. I'm not gonna recommend it. Sleep Token aren't for me. What can I tell you? Number 28, Azizam by Ed Sheeran. So I think we might be on the other side of the Ed Sheeran backlash cycle, which in retrospect felt really overheated and stupid. I'm gonna say it again. More of a pushback against his overexposure, his basic earnestness, and a reflection on quality that didn't seem remotely representative or consistent with what we actually got from him, egged on by the worst sides of social media pile-on culture. So yeah, I was happy Ed Sheeran is now largely independent, doing things with a distribution deal his way away from Asylum and Atlantic, and quite frankly, I'm shocked that he charted at all, especially with a song title like this. It's actually Persian for My Darling, taught to Ed Sheeran by his co-producer Ilya, alongside Johnny McDade of Snow Patrol? I shouldn't be this surprised. He's worked a lot with Ed Sheeran since Multiply, but Snow Patrol put out an album last year, goddammit, it kicked a lot of ass. Why can't any of that chart at all? Anyways, when it comes to radio singles that Ed Sheeran's pushed, this is definitely in the better tier. That bass line's got some credible muscle alongside the rattling acoustics and sharp fizzy percussion, even if I'm cooler on some of the wiry synth flourishes and how compressed Ed Sheeran's multi-track vocals sound. I've never been against him playing more in the pop game, but if this had dropped in the late 2010s or very early 2020s, down to the composition prioritizing the drop, would anybody have really noticed? Would it have stood out? If I got a larger issue in that, it's probably the lyrics. Not that they're bad for this sort of dance floor fun, but outside of the word Azizam, they don't really have a flourish that can make it feel like a more distinctive Ed Sheeran song. So it comes across a bit nondescript or underpowered. So yeah, even with my soft spot for Ed Sheeran, I think it ultimately lands on decent. Not bad, not great either. And finally, number 4, All the Way by BigXThePlug featuring Bailey Zimmerman.
Me all the way. Don't ask for all your things back, cussing out my name, yeah, just to go and take back what you say.
Honestly, I'm legit shocked it debuted this high. I knew BigXThePlug had real organic groundswell, and Bailey Zimmerman has enough solo hits to be considered as more than just a Morgan Wallen ripoff, especially when many of those hits are considerably better than what Wallen's releasing these days. But to break through at number 4, this had to be something special, and, you know, I'm not sure it fully is, but I certainly appreciate it a lot more than whenever Morgan Wallen hops on a rap song, as this probably resembles Whiskey Whiskey by Moneybagg Yo the most. But it's also way better, and let's start off with the production. Getting Bandplay and Charlie Cooks to keep things largely in-house in a rap space gives this more of a proper trap foundation with much better mixing and mastering overall in order to support that somber acoustic guitar and pedal steel. It avoids the big issue of a lot of modern country trap done in Nashville with producers that sound like they need that sound explained to them. Moreover, it actually feels cohesive. Bailey Zimmerman can handle this sort of messy, it's goddamn over breakup song effectively, and BigXThePlug's storytelling instincts let him actually build off that. He's able to paint a more layered picture around this breakup in his own regrets of getting too invested, the ugly miscommunications that led up to the end, not shying away from his responsibility in all of it. And I like that a guy with such a loud, bass, burly voice mentions appreciating small moments like the spark of holding her hand and wishing he can get some of that back. A song like this could so easily default to name calling or macho bullshit, it, and neither of them actually do it. They're a little bit more mature than they sometimes get credit, and the through line of this song is just wanting it all to be clear and over with, and I can respect that. Now, could it have hit a little bit harder, feel a bit more distinct with a few more details, maybe play a little bit longer, give Bailey Zimmerman a bridge? Yeah, sure. But I actually think it is really strong. It feels built to be a good hit. Very happy for the both of them. Very good, if not great. I like this a lot. And yeah, easy best of the week. I was hoping it was going to be at least passable, and the fact that it's considerably better, that was a very pleasant surprise. Congrats, Bailey Zimmerman. You're out of my doghouse, at least for now. Now, the worst of the week, I don't think is particularly close. It's going to Chest Pain I Love by Malcolm Todd for being an absolute disaster in so many ways. Let's get rid of that and quickly. Next week, maybe a little bit more of a breather. I'm certainly not complaining. Stay tuned for more of that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.